I wanted to dive into the Dave Naylor and Farhan Lalji clip that came out this week from TSN, talking about betting because Kyle, you love your gambling, your wagering, your understanding of that stuff is far superior to mine. And they had some things to say about the direction that the CFL is headed, what they anticipate happening here going forward, and also looking at if an XFL merger does happen, what does that look like? If it doesn't happen, what does that look like? Because those might be two completely different answers. So here's the clip for you.
And Farhan, we know the CFL is in talks with the owners of the XFL about a collaboration that could lead to a new league, a new game, a new business model, all kinds of changes possibly coming to Canadian football. But we also know it's possible the league could go into the future with the existing 9 teams. And we want to look a little bit about what that would look like, particularly on the revenue side. Coming out of the pandemic, as the CFL looks to return to play, what does the revenue side in the future look like for the Canadian Football League?
Well, I think the league is counting on single game sports betting as the single biggest pot of gold at the end of the rainbow if there is no collaboration with the XFL, or for that matter, even if there is. I think that is huge as far as the business model is concerned. And you and I have talked to a number of experts in the sports gaming industry in the last couple of days, and there really is a wide discrepancy as to what that could do for the league financially. A number of the experts have said, look, there's simply no way to gauge exactly how much it's going to be worth. Others have said this is going to be the second biggest revenue generator behind the television deal. Some estimates have been around $2 million per team, $20 million for the league. So it's going to be interesting to see how that eventually manifests itself because, of course, teams don't get money off a percentage of the actual bets. It's what is your relationship going to be with particular sports books, with different platforms, apps, things of that nature, sponsorship arrangements. Those are the types of things that could bring in potential revenue to the league. As far as Bill C-218 is concerned, it's at a really critical stage right now. It passed overwhelmingly with the House of Commons. It's now sitting at the Senate. And there is a bit of worry that Prime Minister Trudeau could call a quick election. And if this isn't passed through and becomes royal assent prior to that happening, it goes all the way back to the beginning. And this could take another couple of years. So there is some urgency to get this done quickly.
Yeah, and the CFL, if we do get to legal single-game sports wagering in Canada, which I think is going to happen eventually, the CFL is positioned in some ways very well. For one, the sport the CFL plays is football. And we know that in North America, football is the favorite sport of sports bettors. And we know that the CFL season, you get 10, 11 weeks in before the National Football League or the NCAA football starts. So there's a period of exclusivity there where if people want to bet on football legally, the CFL is going to be the object. And I think they think that besides whatever revenues this brings, there could be a bounce to the business from more fan engagement, television revenues. People will watch a game that they've placed a wager on. And also perhaps digging into that age-old problem, the CFL, of trying to get to a younger demographic of fan. Having sports wagering, I think, is a way that they believe that will aid in that process. So both in the short term and the long, there are some potential benefits here for the CFL.
Now, as far as revenue is concerned, one of the other benefits that came out of the pandemic was the fact that forced a number of teams to change their approach to sponsor engagement. For now, prior to the pandemic, it really was all about game day. Everybody's sponsorship and business and interaction, it all came down to how much money you could get back through ticket sales and other activations on game day. But what wound up happening during the pandemic is there were a number of other contests and social media initiatives and things like that that happened. And now a whole new stream of inventory has been created. Certainly that varies based from market to market, but for a number of teams, they've been able to keep their sponsors involved in other initiatives that didn't involve game day. So now you've got that inventory, and when we get games played again, you'll get the game day inventory back. So there is a possibility of an uptick in revenue by creating a 365-day-a-year business model as opposed to just basing it on 10 games a year.
Looking for new sources of revenue has been an age-old challenge in the Canadian Football League, and that is certainly going to be the focus as the league looks forward to return to play in 2021
and beyond. All right, so that is the clip from Farhan Lalji and Dave Naylor right there. I never thought I'd hear royal assent used in a clip, but Farhan dropping some House of Commons knowledge there, some Canadian. I felt like I was back in poli-sci 1G03 or something like that at McMaster University, but yeah, the idea of this being a major player, we all understand the financial benefits of getting sports wagering involved with you. The idea at the end there of having an expedited process of getting more revenue by having a more year-round business approach that has been aided by social media and different activations that are not just on game day that Farhan was talking about. I find that really interesting because I don't know if that is sustainable and that's something that's been created and is here to stay because we've discovered this, or if that was just a replacement because it's the second best thing that we could get compared to having a game day experience with the things people actually want to pay for and things actually sponsors want to partner up with. So like when we get back to normalcy, whenever that is, however that is, whatever that looks like, I don't know whether or not we end up keeping all of the social media. Like, I don't know if, for example, the EE exclusives that Edmonton's been doing right now with Morley Scott and Jamie Elizondo, those are great. I'm sure there's some money that's being passed hands there, or that might just be some makeup money from the fact that you guys have paid us a bunch of money and we can't deliver you the game day experience and the game day branding and Commonwealth Field at the Commonwealth Stadium, Brick Field, and all the rest. Or that might have just been something is here to stay, and maybe you tag that onto a sponsorship moving forward. I really don't know what those business dealings are going to look like, but that is a question I would have.
Okay, so a couple of things on this. One, I just want to caution CFL fans that think single game wagering is going to change the bottom line for the CFL. It's
Why
not.
is that?
If they were in financial trouble before, they're going to be in financial trouble after. Here's the thing. They talk about younger demographics and, gearing, marketing, and advertising towards a younger demographic, and this goes a long way into doing that. I don't know if that's the case. All the younger people I know in my age group, maybe a little bit younger than me, I can't talk about like the 21, 22-year-olds. Wagering isn't really their thing, right? And again, that could just be the people that I know. But from what I get, it's not the thing for the younger generations. Fantasy football is. I think a partnership with DraftKings, where every single week you're doing CFL contests, I think that goes a longer way into gearing towards that younger demographic.
Yeah.
And then the way the CFL can profit off of single game wagering, because here's the thing, and I've told you this many of times on TSN, the amount of dollars that they bring in, and I'm talking about books and sports books, the amount of money that they bring in is a lot, right? I'm talking about the money on a single game, like a single NFL game, they're bringing in a lot of money. But the profit margins that they work in, so they can give a kickback to the CFL, and to be honest, I've never understood that. Why would the book need the CFL? Why would they need to pay the CFL to put their games on their website? They don't.
Licensing agreements, I guess.
But for what? Like, what are you getting a licensing agreement for? You get a billboard at the, on the field. My biggest thing, and I think this is the way they need to go about it, where you look at it from the Premier League standpoint, right? Where at Tim Hortons Field, you're going to have betting kiosks, whether it's 20 or 30 around the stadium, and fans can have the ability to bet there and maybe even cash out there. Then you're talking about, okay, now we can start getting some serious money, because whatever sportsbook's going to operate that kiosk would definitely need to pay the CFL to put that kiosk in the building. But again, for the sports books, and I know in England, some sports books have been very hesitant on doing this. When you put a betting kiosk in the building, what's the percentage of people that are going to bet on the opposition? Not a lot, right?
Yeah.
So every single Ticats game, if the Ticats hammer the Toronto Argonauts, and maybe the Argos are a bad example because the team's just down the road and you'll have some Argos fans there, and there are some Argos fans in Hamilton. Let's say the Calgary Stampeders, right? They are going to get taken to the woodshed if that betting kiosk they're relying on to make a profit, right? Because if the Ticats come out and hammer the Stampeders, then everybody, the 2,000 people that just bet on the Hamilton Tiger Cats down at the kiosk, they're laughing to the bank, and the sportsbook's going to have to pay that out. Now, the only reason why I think it's different than the Premier League is if that same betting company that owns that kiosk also has an online platform where you can bet, they're going to get money from the other side, right? Yeah. They're going to get, all the people from Calgary betting on the other side. In the CFL, can you grow this to enough of a scale where you're going to offset that massive loss for a sports book, right? Like all the Ticats fans that are betting on the Ticats against the Stampeders, can you get enough Stampeders money to make it worth it, or are they just going to get taken to the woodshed down at Tim Hortons Field?
So here's my follow up on all of this stuff, because again, I'm super
and it changes if the Ticats lose, then obviously the sportsbook's going to make a lot of money.
Well, that's my thinking, is like that's how gambling works, is that you know you can hammer the Ticats and all the fans that bet on it are laughing all the way to the bank, unless they're not. And if they're not, then it's you play that split where you end up having basically all the 2,000 fans go home pissed off because maybe they lost a little bit of money. I just imagine as well, like, is there a point at which the line actually moves? Because you talk about the Ticats hammering the Stamps.
Yep.
Which, by the way, we haven't seen that in a very long time. So it's funny that you picked that example. But but if you were to have that and people were hammering the over, let's say, like if you were hammering the over, would the spread actually move with that in game? And would you be getting different point spread values in game because there's a different amount of people betting in game? Because you mentioned 2,000 people as just like a throwaway number.
Yeah.
I genuinely wonder the interest in all of the studies and stuff that I've seen on sports wagering. If you get 26,000 people at Tim Hortons Field, how many people would be placing a bet? Because I think at the start it might be couple hundred to 1,000, but once it became socially acceptable, once it became standardized, once the
7,000,
once the guy next to you is going, it's like, what's to say you don't end up there's probably at Ticats game, and again, we're just using Hamilton because it's the place that we know and we see the demographics and stands and all the rest. 26,000 people in the stands. There's at least 10,000 males of 18 years or older in the stands. How many of those 10,000, and it's not just the fact that men are more likely to bet than women are, which is statistically correct as well.
Yeah.
But how many of those 10,000 men of 18 plus demographics, 18 to 54, 18 to 49, whatever you want, how many of them do you think would go once it would be standardized? Because that's intriguing to me to see the growth potential. Because I think at the start, we're all expecting like, oh, Bill C218, which I called it Bill C128 earlier. I messed up my number. But thank you, Farhan and Dave. But if that ends up passing, and at the beginning, we're all like, hey, the league is fixed, millions of dollars flowing in, it's going to be crazy. I don't think it's going to be like that at the start. Because I think at the start, when you really put it into human terms of a betting kiosk inside the stadium, how many people are going to go and use that directly? It's foreign to them. It's different. It's weird. Yeah. It's you're not going to be accepting of it in your game day experience at first. But that's where the growth, I think, comes from.
Well, and I think, I've told you this many times. The people that are wagering, the new people to sports wagering in Canada, if this bill becomes a thing, I don't know what those numbers are going to look like. The people that have already been betting, because guess what? There are millions of dollars bet on the CFL every single year online, right? That's why the Canadian government wants to get in on this.
That's why Kevin Waugh is going after organized crime in a way that makes me worry for Kevin Waugh, because I don't want him to get whacked. Okay.
Yeah, because those sleazebags at Bet365, that they're coming for you, right? The Canadian government's coming for you. So, like, this isn't a thing for like bettors. They're like, okay, the biggest thing for betting in Canada is the casino, right? Because if a casino puts the infrastructure in place where I can lay a bet down, I can watch the game on TV, and I can get paid out before I walk out the door, that's a game changer, right? Now I don't have to, go on Bet365, and I'm just using them as an example. Go on their website, lay a bet down, win $1,200, and all of a sudden I'm waiting 5 to 7 days for a money order. Because that sucks. And I've been through that process. It sucks waiting, right? Because your money's tied up and you can't bet it on other things that you want to bet
on.
Well,
that's the sketchy thing about the gambling world too, is why is your money tied up? Because it's being used for other purposes for Bet365.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's how the sports books operate, so they can, make a certain profit. And, Bet365 or Sports Interaction, that's a Canadian company. It'll be interesting to see how they adjust based on how this law gets passed down and what the details are, because we're trying to pass down a law, but we have no idea what the details are, and the details are what matter to gamblers. Because if the details, for example, right, when marijuana got legalized in Canada, there are a lot of people that were already, users of marijuana, were getting their marijuana other places, right? Yep. When they legalized it, if the Canadian government said you're going to pay a 35% tax on the marijuana, people are going to be like, huh? Screw that. I'm not buying it through like the legal channel. I'm going to buy it the way I've been buying it. I don't want to pay 35% tax. Canadian government's got to be very careful for that, because the sports books, like I say, the money they bring in is a lot, but those profit margins, they get squeezed so much. They make money off the juice, right? And what I mean by that, Ticats -2.5, -110. You have to lay 10 cents to the dollar to make money, right? Well, that 10 cents, guess where it's going to go? The sports book. Yeah. And people betting +2.5 on the other side. That money, that 10 cents, is going to the sports book. That's how the sports book makes money. And then the differential, or the difference in the amount of money that they're bringing in based on either side. Sometimes they lose money on a game. Sometimes they make a lot of money on a game based on where the public money is coming in from. But again, the details are what's going to make this work for everybody involved. The sports book, the bettors, and the CFL, if they try to profit off of this stuff.
Yeah, what I'm interested in is that split that you talk about, because when there's this amount of money that's available that has not been available before, like this is, imagine you are, you're working at a, I don't want to be like, The Office, where Oscar's explaining finances for grade 4s to Michael. And he's like, explain it to me like I'm a grade 3. But if you are working at a lemonade stand and there's only 10 cars that go past, and 7 of them want to buy your lemonade for $1 a pop, it's like, yeah, you're making $7. Okay, now imagine you move your lemonade stand to a place where there's 500 cars that go past each day. All of this new money is available. How are you going to split that? How are you going to divide that? And the government is not doing this out of the kindness of their heart to save the CFL. They don't give a damn. Like, as much as some of the MPs might that have presented this bill, and they say it might be able to save the CFL's financial situation, if the CFL wanted to do a handout and they wanted to be the caregivers and the caretakers and the rest of the CFL, they would have just given the interest-free loan, or they would have done the deal where they get a piece of something and they end up being able to get a little chunk back at the end of the season, or maybe it's in a loan that has interest on it, but they pay it up front, or whatever it might be. Like, there's a lot of ways to do that. They didn't do any of that. So they're not interested in just helping. They're interested in creating a revenue stream that, yeah, sure, CFL, you are the thing that generates the millions and millions of dollars, but you generate it and we get a piece. And that's why we want to be able to do this. And on top of that, of course, the sports books, like you say, the daily fantasy stuff is intriguing to me, especially because DraftKings is getting involved in the media sponsorship game now, where they're sponsoring Bo Levi Mitchell's new podcast with Uninterrupted Canada. They're also they're the presenting sponsor of Dan Le Batard's podcast, $50 million over a 3.5 or 4 year agreement, I believe it is. So they're throwing money around in media, which makes me think, CFL broadcasts might not be brought to you by Shaw anymore. Like, it might be welcome to the 108th Grey Cup presented by DraftKings, and that's totally legitimate. That's going to happen, I think, moving forward here. More on-field sponsorship, more A-frames, more in-stadium branding. That's all going to happen. But the thing that I laugh at, Kyle, is like, because I think in my mind, because I've never been a gambler, sports wagering person, that I have always deemed it to kind of be like this sort of dangerous thing on the fringes, as you talk about, because people are doing it. We know they're doing it, but it's not legalized and it's not standardized. It's not socially accepted inside the stadium. I remember, maybe my image of this comes from being at a Bills game where I sat next to a guy that I've never met before, who I'm very sure had done the booger sugar, the Colombian Bam Bam, before he came into the game. And he was wearing a Ski-Doo jacket, and he was there on his phone the entire game against the Pittsburgh Steelers back in like 2017, on his phone, calling people left, right, and center, placing wages on the NFL from inside the stadium as he was sitting.
That's an old school bookie.
As he was sitting in the stands next to me. And I'm just sitting there with a cold beer in my hand and -20 with one of my friends watching the game. And I'm going, man, that seems like a lot of work. Like, I'm just here to watch the football because I love watching the football. So I've always viewed it as kind of this fringe thing. But you know how when you're I don't know if they do this at Ticats games because I'm always working, but at NFL games after halftime, the end of halftime or the start of the fourth quarter, no more alcohol sales. Boom, done. Cut off, no more. Is that the potential?
I think it's the third quarter. I think it's 5 minutes left in the third. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So by that point, I don't need any more beer. So, which just never affected me. But I look at this as just being funny, like the visual of, and you know this from being at Ticats games, being in the stands. Hammered guy walking through the concourse wants to place a bet. Do they shut that down the same way they do beer in Buffalo for Bills games, where it's like, well, you can't bet on the final result after halftime or whatever that might be? Because I'm just imagining a guy in like a Stala 88 jersey walking up to a betting kiosk like it's a vending machine, hammered out of his tree and just shaking come on, give me, no, I want to bet. And that's going to be one of those things where we're going to be like, wow, this evolved quickly. I did not see this incarnation of the CFL coming where people are like, I need the juice. Let me squeeze the juice, and just screaming at machines in the concourse as parents are walking past with their kids on their way to, Stripes, Ticats, Jungle Gym, and being like, don't look, honey, it's just a man betting on sports.
Yeah. So I never even thought of that, right? That drunk people putting bets in. And if
my God,
competent
that's
enough,
gonna be 50% of the bets. A guy's gonna
I know.
have a beer
It's like
in the
know
first
your
quarter.
limit, play within it.
Yeah, he's gonna see Jeremiah Masoli throw 3 touchdowns in the first quarter. I'll be right back, honey. I gotta go to the bathroom. He's gonna run to the concourse, lay down their entire child's education savings plan, and then come back in the third quarter and realize, ooh, I've made a terrible mistake.
Yeah. There's probably going to be a limit on how much you can bet at the kiosk.
I would hope so.
I don't know what that limit's going to be. It's probably going to be like $1,000. But even $1,000, right? Especially in today's world, a guy makes a drunk bet for $1,000. His wife is yelling at him for the next 3 months.
If I do that for $100, Marlene's looking at me and going, are you serious? Do you know how much $100 is in terms of tangible baby products that we actually need to have going forward? So I don't know what they do with the limit. I don't know what they do with the cutoff, but those are, again, the details. Well, those are the things that we're looking at and going, okay, how is this actually going to tangibly look if it's in stadiums? And how soon can it be applied to being inside of stadiums? Because we're talking about 2021. Do you think that we're ready to set up wagering in stadiums anytime in 2021? Because I don't.
Yeah. I even think it'd be, more suited towards a phone app type of situation where the CFL has a betting app on their phone sponsored by, like you said, DraftKings Sportsbook. And again, they would try to be legal in Canada, or, Bet365 or another sports book. I think they're be better suited that way because you don't want the massive line, right? And people are going to get really mad if 5 minutes before the game kicks off and you have to get your bet in for the actual game. They can't because there's 2 guys that have no idea how to work the betting machine, and all of a sudden they miss their bet, and then they're like, what, screw this. And then next time they're like, I'm just going to bet online. Like, forget these kiosk situations. So I think they'd be better suited to go towards a phone app kind of method. I think the other thing that I'm looking at this from is if you're a CFL team, how do you push people towards the kiosk? Because that's a fine line to walk too, right? So CFL marketing departments are going to have to really kind of change their tune, and whatever line was set between betting and, hey, fair play stuff, you're going to have to kind of move that line a little bit. To get people towards those kiosks. So that'll be interesting to see.
You know what it actually feels like to me, just based off of like some very limited reading on the topic, but is prohibition. It feels like we're about to lift prohibition and we're about to do it in the most public way possible. Because you used marijuana as an example earlier, which is a great example of something that's been legalized lately. But we are going from something that has been smuggled underground amongst small groups of people that are sharing secrets on how to do this properly or talk to a guy.
But it's not underground.
But what I'm saying is it's underground to people like me. Yeah. I don't have any. If you were to tell me right now, hey, do you want to bet on the Leafs in the Habs game tonight? I'd be like, I don't know how. I know the brands. I know the names of the websites I should probably go to. I'm sure they make it very easy for me to go there and to be able to do it online. But if I were sitting in the stands and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, I'm going to go make a bet. Do you want to come? I'd be like, I don't know the first thing. And full transparency on this as well. And know what that reminds me of? I went with a bunch of my McMaster football buddies to a strip club, my first strip club ever one time. And as we're going in, they're like, hey, are you ready to go in? Do you want to go and hang out, dance? I'm like, I have no idea how this works. I've never been. I felt so out of. I'm such a boring person at heart that some of these foreign things to me, they just don't work with how my mind works. Where I'm like, you want me to go where and do what and talk to who, and all of these things are just so strange that for me it feels underground, even though it's not. Like you say, it's very pervasive throughout society. And as Dave Naylor said to start off the segment here, the number of people that are betting on football absolutely has to be accessed by the CFL, and that's the goal, is to generate that revenue based off the interest that's already there. And they also mentioned in a different clip on TSN.ca, moving up the season to get away from the NFL, because moving your football earlier than the NFL by a month might be worth millions of dollars.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I want to point out as well, right? This gentleman, I think in Saskatchewan, that's pushing this bill kind of through, to the Senate and whatever the case may be. They're doing this for their own pockets, for the government's pockets, to get more revenue so the government can use, which I'm a big proponent of. I'm a big fan of the government creating ways to make money and not just taking it from us, right? In a way, I mean, they are taking it from us, but I think it's important to state they're not doing this for the CFL, because the amount of money generated in Canada on sports wagering, single game sports wagering, is not going to come from the CFL. It's going to come from the NFL. I hate to tell you, Canadians bet on the NFL way more than they bet on the CFL, and it's going to stay that way forever, right? That's just the way it is. So that's why I'm saying, and I started this whole conversation out with, I want to caution people that think single game sports wagering is going to save the CFL, because it's not. It's simply not. So it'll be very telling to see how the next couple of months go, and whether or not we can get this going for the new CFL season. Because when the CFL comes back, in whatever capacity it's going to come back, I think they're going to need something different to draw people in. And maybe this is the way to do it. Now, do I expect the government to have everything finalized in 90 days? Hell no. The government takes forever to put stuff through. We've seen that in Hamilton, right? Jim Taddy used to tell us all the time, right? That Red Hill Valley Parkway, what'd that take? 35 years to build?
Yeah, he said he was at the Hamilton Library doing some research, and he stumbled upon a piece of paper where they're like, hey, this Red Hill, this might be a good idea. The LRT is another thing right now in Hamilton where it's like, I feel like they've been talking about it since I came to Hamilton for McMaster University education in 2010. But at the same time, like, Richardson Stadium just got built in Kingston for Queen's University. They just finalized it. They're putting a new pavilion in, all this stuff. And I remember talking to Glenn McKay, who was a receiver for the Ticats way back when, that was out of Windsor. And when I was at McMaster, he was a Ticat, and he needed me to throw to him once in a while. And so we would chuck the ball around. And one day we were sitting down during a break, having some water, and he goes, why didn't you go to Queens? I'm like, I don't know, just the vibe didn't really fit with me. I didn't really want to go there. I didn't like it. And he goes, they still showing you guys those drawings of the new Richardson Stadium? And I went, yep. I go, Glenn, you played in the East-West Bowl in like 2003 or 2004, which means when you were coming out of high school, you got recruited by Queens in like 1998 or 1999. And he's like, yeah. And they showed me a drawing of the new Richardson Stadium. Well, congratulations, Queens. It's up. It's beautiful. It looks amazing. I'm excited to go watch a game there. I haven't been as of yet. But sometimes these things take a long time, and sometimes they're promised way before they can actually be delivered on. And I think there's a goal to push this stuff through quickly, and for a lot of people involved, it's for all the right reasons. You want there to be more money for the CFL, you want it to sustain, you want to save it, whatever your reasoning is, your motives. But yeah, sometimes this stuff takes longer than we expect, so I'm not banking on this stuff being readily available ASAP.
That's hilarious that they're trying to recruit players with stadium drawings. Number one, is this going to be done by the time I graduate? Because if not, the hell do I care?
Well, that's
right?
like, even at McMaster right now, they're putting this huge edition on the Pulse. And I'm like, I hope they're not selling that to students as, hey, you're going to have this great expanded workout space and mental health studio and all the rest.
No.
I'm like, because that's not going to be done by the time that the people who are there in second or third year are everything. I mean, as far as I know, it's not going to be done in the very, very near future. So yeah, promising things. I think this is a general rule for life, right? Is when somebody promises you something that sounds grandiose, maybe check the timeline.